Hello, wellness teachers. Welcome to Analytical Rubric Modeling for Wellness classes. Today I'm going to be showing you or going through the process with one of your performance tasks just so you can see what it looks like in a wellness classroom. I know that you guys have created one so far, and mine is a little bit different than what you have already created. Doesn't mean yours is wrong. It was just a slightly different approach. So I would suggest that you take what I've done today and compare it to what you have already done and make some tweaks then. So before we get started, you will need 4 documents to work through the process today. These all came from our early release day on February 18th. You'll need the identifying important performance qualities. You will also need the criteria and rubric ideas. That's the one that has all the traits. You will need figures J4 and J6, the 4 types of criteria, and then descriptive terms for differences in degree. All of these can be found digitally on your Canvas page for your professional development, or they were also available in the packet that we provided to you. And then your rubric. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you want to do when you're creating that analytical rubric is really look at your stage 1. Starting with your transfer goal and reading through and just reminding yourselves of the things that you have determined are most important. The transfer goal for your Healthy Lifestyles unit is that students will be able to independently use their learning to effectively analyze and utilize data to improve or maintain their individual health. So keeping this in mind, and then also the meaning and acquisition of knowledge and skill areas, we're going to take a look at your performance task. This is the GRASP version of your performance task. Go ahead and pause the video and read through this document. Push play when you're ready for the next one. Since your performance task is a 2-page document, what I'm going to ask you to do is pause the video, read the first page, push play, pause, read the second page, and then resume the video when everybody's ready to move on. The first document that we're going to use then is the identifying important performance qualities. Part 1 is done individually without your PLC. And your job in Part 1 is to list the important qualities or traits for, in this case, goal setting. This document, the criteria and rubric ideas that has the sample indicators, is the document that I will use to go through to determine which traits are most important for this performance task. When I do this by myself, I honestly go through and just highlight the document. It's fast, easy, and then easy to share with my PLC. Since I'm modeling this for you today, I will be using the document on the next slide. So it's really up to you which way you determine to do this. Today, let's see, we are individually listing the important qualities or traits for, I would call this goal setting. That's what your students are doing. So we're going to write this in here. You can follow along with me if you'd like on your own document. And going through, I'm going to go through the document that lists the traits and determine which traits I think are most important. Just keeping in mind what the transfer goal is and what my students are being asked to do here. So all I'm doing is just skimming down that document right now. I'm not really even paying attention to which column, which criteria the words are coming from. The first thing that I think about is the word appropriate. So the goals that my students are setting should be appropriate based off of their data that they have. Skimming down, I think their analysis should be in-depth. Let's see. It should be logical. I want them to make connections where they are and where they can be. Should be thorough. Next column in process. The first word that I come through is effective. So here I'm thinking about how they arrive at there. The process is how they arrive at what they've come up with, the method that they've used. I think it should be planned. Oops. It should be purposeful. And that's it for that column. I'm going to move on to the quality column. Skimming through that column, I really don't see any words that jump out at me, traits that jump out that really show me that this is what a student should be doing when they're assessing where they are and setting goals. So I'm just going to skip that column and looking at results then. I think their results should be effective. I think they should be responsive, so responsive to where they currently are and where they want to be. I think that their information should be useful. Okay, so now that I've determined by myself where or which traits I think are important, it's now time to come together with my PLC, and then we'll go through each of our lists and we'll determine which ones are most important. So as a PLC, we're going to say that these are the traits that we found important that are listed down in Part 2. Part 2 says that with your group, you are to agree to 4 to 6 of the most important traits, and they're to be listed here. It gives you 4 to 6 because that seems manageable. I wouldn't go much less. I think then there's not a lot that you're assessing, and I wouldn't go much more because I think it would be overwhelming. So here we've determined that as a PLC, appropriate, logical, making connections, effective, and planned are the most important things when they're setting these goals and writing a plan. So when I look at where these words come from, which categories they come from, or which criteria, the first 3 are coming from content. When I think about the content, I'm thinking about the goal setting that they are creating. So I'm really thinking overall here, were the goals appropriate? Did they set the right kind of goals based on what they know about themselves right now? Were goals, and I'm just writing this as a note to myself. Were goals appropriate? Sorry about my chicken scratch. And then my other 2 words actually come from the process criteria. And so here I'm thinking about that plan that they created. Did they use a process to make it like realistic? Plan, realistic. Okay, so from here, I'm ready to move on to my next step. The next step is going to involve figures J4 and J6. Honestly, J4 is where they have the questions that go along with the criteria. I would use that as a resource if I'm struggling with the previous step, the step that we just went over. So if you're really stuck, I don't know what traits are important, I don't know what I should be looking for, use those questions as your guideline, these questions right here. Sorry, that's a little bit blurry, but you have a copy of that. Since I'm not stuck, I'm going to go ahead and move on to these descriptive terms. So this is the document, figure J6, that I'm going to be using as I'm building my rubric. This will help me use those different degrees in my continuum of learning when I think about a student who's an expert and I think about the student who's a novice, who's just beginning. This is the document I'll be using as I'm working through the rubric. So for me, this is the fun part. This is where we get to start actually writing what we think about here, what we're assessing. The understanding, I think, that we're using for our students to demonstrate their knowledge is really self-knowledge. They are thinking about where they are and where they want to be. So I'm going to go ahead and jot that down up here. Self-knowledge, again, sorry about the chicken scratch. I'll start typing here in a minute so it'll be easier to see. And then that product or the performance that they're going to create a plan. And I guess really goals. The plan is going to include goals for fitness. Those two go hand in hand there. All right, I am only working through 2 criteria. You can use more than that. A lot of rubrics that I've been creating have really 3. You could obviously have 4. There are 4 columns there. I wouldn't go for more than 4 because I think, again, that would be overwhelming and it would be a difficult rubric to use. And I really wouldn't go under 2 because then are you really getting to the heart of what the student's supposed to be doing? So for today, we're using 2. The first column that I'm going to focus on is the content criteria, the criteria of content. And so when I think about what this means for the student, on the other document I said that we're asking if the goals are appropriate. And so really, I'm just going to use that word there for the students. I don't think there's any reason to make this fancy. We want this language in our rubric to be something that our students can read and understand because it's going to be feedback for them. My other column is the process column. I'm just going to skip over to give myself some more room. Process. And the process is really where they're putting that plan together, where they're writing their plan. So they're going to have all this data, but then they're actually going to explain through some writing what it is that they plan on doing. Okay, so I'm just going to focus on one column at a time here. So I'm working on that content criteria, the goals. So what does it mean when I'm thinking about the goals that my students are setting? What do I need to think about? Using my document that has the differences in degree, I think the best thing to use here is, I'm going to go with frequency. So are those goals, how frequently are they realistic? How frequently are they connected to their prior data? So I'm going to use frequency here. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to say consistently sets logical. I'm using some of those traits that I've found in my previous brainstorming. Goals that are connected. Appropriately, if I can type, to fitnessgram data. And then I feel like I need to add something else about the goals. Goals will maintain fitness or create improvement. Now the hard part for this column is actually taken care of. I have my wording in place, I just need to change my degrees. So in this case, my degrees of frequency. So my 3, I'm going to say that they generally sets logical goals that are connected appropriately to fitnessgram data. goals will create or maintain fitness. Will create, let me do this differently. Will maintain fitness, will maintain or improve fitness. So I've changed my stem a little, not my stem, but I've changed the words that I have here. And you can, this is my rough draft, remember. So we can always go back and make changes after we have the rough draft written. Okay. Next column down, using my differences in degrees, I'm going to say that they occasionally sets logical goals that are connected appropriately to fitness. You see where this is going? Gram data. And then I'm going to throw in another difference in degree here because, you know what, maybe those goals, they may not maintain or improve. So the goals, let's say rarely or never, they may or may not. Yeah, let's do that one. Goals may or may not create fitness improvement. Create, let's see, how did I say that above? Will maintain fitness or create improvement, may or may not maintain fitness or create fitness improvement. Okay? That goes there. My last one then, you can see how our continuum of learning gets a little bit less here. We're going to say, I think here we'll use the rarely. Rarely or never sets logical goals that are connected appropriately. I have a hard time typing that word. To fitness gram data. And then here I'll say that the goals will not maintain or create fitness improvement. Oh. Okay. Thanks for bearing with me with the technology. Okay, so now I'm ready to go ahead and work through the plan column. In the plan column, I'm thinking about that, what they're going to be writing about their goals. So they have their chart where they're putting in their prior data, where they think they will be, and then how are they explaining what they're doing here. So thinking about the idea that they have to explain this, explain their self-knowledge, I think I'm going to go with the degrees of clarity here. Those will be the stems that I'm working with, the terms that I'm working with. So that's where we see exceptionally clear or easy to follow. So I'm going to say here that their plan, let me change this to blue here really quickly. Their plan is exceptionally clear and follows the 5 fitness components in a variety of settings. because we want them to be able to not just focus in one area. We want them to look at all of those different components. My next section down for my 3, then I'm going to say that it's generally clear. Plan is generally clear and follows the 5 fitness components in a variety of settings. So this is where the kids, they know what they're talking about. They maybe just didn't choose the best way to say it, but they still have everything there that they need to have. My next column, or my next row down then, is going to be where it starts to lack clarity based on my degrees of clarity here. So the plan lacks clarity and is difficult to follow. It partially, now I'm using another degree, a difference in degree here. So I'm thinking about, those students who their plan's okay, but maybe they haven't explored all 5 components of the fitness, or maybe they haven't put everything in a variety of settings. They just have a couple of settings. So I think those students they're partial, they're incomplete. So now I'm also using the degrees of understanding for my terms. So it partially follows the 5 fitness components within a variety of settings. And now I'm ready for my last one. So this is where the plan is unclear. I'm using the difference in degrees here. And is impossible to follow. Using my degrees of understanding then, their misunderstandings or serious misconceptions. So I'm going to say misunderstandings. I'm going to use them both. Or serious misconceptions about the 5 fitness components within a variety of settings. I'm having a hard time typing today. Sorry. All right. So, there we go. It doesn't look pretty, but my information that I want is here. What I would do at this point is I would take a look, what you need to do is take a look at your 4s and say, okay, what's in blue here? These right here, if a student would score mastery, would score a 4 in each of these criteria, are they showing mastery of the transfer goal, of the understandings, of the essential questions, of the knowledge and the skills that we want them to have? If the answer to that is yes, and in this case I think it is, then you just need to do a little bit of tweaking with your wording just to make sure everything's worded the way you want to. If your answer to that is no, then it's time to go back through the process and say, okay, what are we missing here? If I'm saying no, why am I saying no? What am I leaving out in my rubric? because it's important to assess what we think is important, what we want our students to walk away with. Since my answer is yes on this rubric, then again, all I need to do is go through and clean this up a little bit. The other thing that I have to make sure that I do is set my weights. So thinking about their transfer goal, thinking about all those things that we've just talked about, what is most important here? Are the goals in the written plan, are they equally important? Or do I feel like one of these columns is more important than the other? So let's say I think that their goals that they're setting is more important than how they actually write it out to me. And so I might weight this a 3. And I might weight the plan just a 1 or maybe a 2. That's a discussion that the PLC would have to have. And then what I would do is in my rubric, go ahead and write down the points in each of these cells, because then it becomes much easier when it's time for you to actually do the grading. So then let's see, there'd be a 12 in here. I'm taking the 3 times the 4. Then this would be a 9. This would be a 6. This would be a 3. Over in that plan column then, these are face values, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Obviously, you're going to put them in there so that they look nicer. This is just our rough draft today. When I'm also publishing this for my students, I don't need to include content up here. I don't need to include process up here. I may or may not use this information up here. That's up to you. If you feel like your students would understand it, great. If you don't, leave it out. And there's our rubric for wellness. There's our example. A few reminders before we part ways. Remember, this is a journey. Remember our little sailboat from February 18th? We are on this journey together. The process in writing your rubric is so important. Don't skip steps of the process. Use the documents that are given to you. They will help you determine what's most important. You know your content, so how are you going to assess it? How can you provide feedback to your students in a way that's relevant to them? This process will help you do that. Your analytical rubrics that you're creating here, I know they're a pain at first, but really what they're doing is they're providing feedback to your students and to you. So they actually have words that they can look at on that rubric and they can say, oh, well, I see here that the reason why I scored where I scored is because I left out some of the 5 fitness components. I didn't have all 5. Or maybe they say, oh, okay, I can see based on this rubric that my goals are unrealistic. So it's giving them that feedback. As a teacher, then, that gives you feedback for your instruction. Where are my students really struggling? Where, on a whole, are my students doing awesome? What do they really understand? Those analytical rubrics give you that really detailed feedback. As always, as you're working through anything in UBD, if you need help, seek out Shelley, seek out me. Let us know if you have questions. We want to be able to help you. Have a great day, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I know it's kind of painful, but I hope that you find this to be helpful.